And what blew my mind was when I was in a BWO and I saw our mentor, he ran up like 30K in less than an hour and a half. From then, it was never the same. I'm like, I have to figure this out. At the time, I gave up on it, and then thank God it came back to me. I'm like, I'm locking it. If you keep doing what you're supposed to be doing, you're going to have it. But in the midst of that, are you willing to lose everything? And then it comes to either you want to commit to using your time in a more efficient and effective way, or you want to continue to use that not having time, which is not a real thing, as an excuse for why you're not achieving your goals.
I ain't acting, I'm just speaking what I see behind the lens. Even though I'm speaking roles, the creator I am. Watch the rest devour.
Peace, love, and prosperity, family. It's King and Light on the Move Different podcast. This is Move Different Mondays, and I'm here with my very first guest to open it up, TaJ, the wellness coach, entrepreneur, day trader, you name it. She's probably that. Titles is not her limitation, but just so y'all can get a little bit familiar. Here on the Move Different podcast, what we talk about is how do you move different with your time, money, relationships, and goals in life. We all go through situations where we either content and stay stuck, but a lot of us don't like being stuck like Chuck. We like to self-transform and transition to a higher level in life. So here we are today to talk about the journey of TaJ and what she's experienced and what she can share with the audience as far as wisdom, inspiration, and some motivation. TaJ, thank you for joining the Move Different podcast.
I'm so happy to be here.
Thank you. So, just to let the viewers know a little more about you, how'd you get into being a wellness coach?
So I have a history of giving great advice and not taking it. And I was part of the BWO back around like circa 19 or 2020. And one thing that Derek Grace said, he's like, you have been giving out all this free advice for years to basically fall on deaf ears. And you're not getting paid for all that energy and wisdom you're spilling out. So it's like you need to monetize that. And so it took a couple of years, and I moved to Atlanta, and I joined a marketing company, TLC, and their health and wellness products, they actually work. So I was using them, and I'm like, okay, how can I integrate this? Because I didn't want it to be just fitness, because it's so much more than that. And I feel like the way you treat your body is a reflection of what's going on as far as your mental and your soul alignment. So I wanted it to be more of a holistic approach. So instead of just going with that or going with like a beach body program, I decided to encompass it on my own. So Live Well Coaching was birthed from there. And the goal was basically to help people understand what's keeping them stuck and really dig deep and overcome that, in short, and holding them accountable, because I feel like for some people, we're just souls who can manage it more so alone, and it's not easy, but we're able to persevere through it. And for some people, they need that support system. Like for some people, that's a make or break type of thing.
Definitely.
So I wanted to be that person to hold them accountable and support them and let them know, like, as long as you're making a genuine effort towards your goals, and we're going to check in every week on that, you're on the right path. You know, it may go backwards, it may feel stagnant sometimes, but as long as you're holding that intention and those actions are following that intention day in and day out, it's inevitable for you to reach where you want to reach. So that's kind of where it came from.
I love it. Okay, so how long have you been involved in that field?
I would say the past 2 years, give or take. And it's a funny story because I had my wellness coaching business, and then I decided I didn't like sales.
Like most folks, I can relate.
So I had to have a real moment with myself. And I'm like, okay, either you make the commitment. Are you willing to learn how to be a good saleswoman, or are you not? And you got to keep it 100, because it's going to show in your results if you're committed or not. And I said, honestly, no. And it's like, okay, well, then what are you going to do to pivot? So I decided, I'm like, okay, the goal is to make this accessible to as many people as possible. So how can I do that? YouTube is free for everybody.
Definitely.
So if they want to show up for themselves and learn and grow, it's accessible. And I don't have to be a salesperson. And I decided that eventually I'll have a team to take care of that part and I could just provide the service because it's just not my thing.
You don't want to be in front of the camera all the time.
It's like, I think I could do it if I committed myself to it, but it's not something at that time in my life that I was willing to commit to. So that's kind of where we are with that. And then I started the podcast. So.
Okay, yeah. See, podcast as well. I forgot that title. I'm saying that if you know her, she does it. Speaking of that, though, so yeah, getting a little bit of eerie with the sales and starting to move forward with the podcast. How'd you get into day trade?
So it was the BWO back in 2020. That was when I became a nurse during the pandemic. So I was an ICU nurse, and it was just a lot, emotionally, mentally, spiritually, and I just knew, first of all, my first degree was biology. So I entered corporate America after graduating in 2017. And I instantly knew, I'm like, this structure is not for me. Like, I'm not with it. So there are no entrepreneurs in my family. And so but I always knew, I'm like, there has to be something better than this and more freedom. Freedom always, like, at a certain age, it became my driver. So from there, I ran into the BWO, joined that, and got introduced to bond futures trading. So with that, long story short, it ended up being kind of a fall through situation with our instructor, and like the BWO dissolved. And it left me a little upset because I saw so much promise in it. So for a time, I stuck with it for like a couple months. And then after that, I just lost it because I was like, no. So I went back to nursing. And then fast forward to this past November 2023. Well, even a year before that, I found Jessica Lane on an Earn Your Leisure podcast interview. I think it was or Inside the Bowl with Ash Cash, one of those. So I was like, okay, I've been burned by a mentor once, so let me just take some time. And the great thing about her, she does Sunday calls. So every year, like for a year, I followed her every Sunday, seeing how she shows up and her trades play out back to back to back. And so I'm like, okay, it's worth the investment. So I ended up deciding to do that. And that's Forex trading, which is a whole other story because people think Forex is a scam. And it's like, no, it's not a marketing company. It's like trading stocks or anything else. So
correct me. Sorry. I thought Forex trading was the same thing. So maybe there's viewers out there that don't know the difference. So what's the difference?
So the issue was around the pandemic, there was a certain multi-level marketing company and they recruited a bunch of people with this, oh, you're going to get the limbo and the mansion and all that good stuff, and not telling them this is the trading process. And so they were treating it more like a recruitment, and you got payout for the people under you or in your team, like a multi-level, and they weren't really teaching the educational aspect of it. So with that, people were left like high and dry because they're like, I didn't come to recruit. I came to learn how to trade as an entrepreneur, like be on my own and self-sustain. So that ran into a whole lot of issues. So when people see all those Forex bots in the comments, it's spam. And that's what gives Forex a bad name on top of that specific company. But trading Forex, all you're doing is trading currency, like the fluctuations in currency. So say like there is the Great British Pound and the US dollar. So if the Great British Pound is doing better than US dollar, that specific pair is going to rise. And then vice versa. If the US dollar is doing better than the British Pound, it's going to lower. So that's basically what it is. It's based off market fluctuations, based off the economy, the global economy. And anytime you are, and this is what my mentor always says, anytime you're having a transaction, anytime money is being handed over, you're participating in the foreign exchange market. That's all it is. So it's like making money off Microsoft going up or down, or whatever. It's the same thing.
See, that can reel me and look more. Somebody put it like that. I ain't never heard it put like that.
And what blew my mind was when I was in a BWO and I saw our mentor. He ran up like 30K in less than an hour and a half. From then, it was never the same. I'm like, I have to figure this out. At the time, I gave up on it, and then thank God it came back to me. I'm like, I'm locking in. So that's what I've been doing since last November.
I love it.
Things are great. So yeah.
I love it. Okay. I'm gonna master this. I'm not gonna. That's good that you didn't let that traumatic experience like really take you over and just like I'm giving up. I have to go back to corporate. So how did you? Before we get into the 4 pillars, what was it about you that's like I'm not gonna just stop because it didn't go how I thought it was gonna go? What made you keep going?
Honestly, having to go and clock in. When I would put on my scrubs, it felt like death was literally overtaking me. And I can be a little dramatic, but that's literally how it felt. And for me, learning energy and the law of attraction or whatever universal law. It's if you're feeling like that, anytime you are talking yourself into doing something over and over again, you're having to constantly recalibrate your energy to feel good enough or bounce back from that experience. That means it's out of alignment with your highest path in your path of least resistance. So you need to let it go. And that's the challenge of being a human in these human brains. And we can go a little metaphysical later, but understanding you were in the driver's seat, like you told me about your previous podcast. And it's about realizing that, and yes, that comes with a lot of responsibility, but on the other side of that responsibility is a freedom. Nobody can tell you how much you're worth per hour. Nobody can tell you when you can go on vacation, and nobody can tell you you have to sit in this building for 8 to 12 hours taking care of things that are not necessarily, like, as a nurse, you literally are, you're the med tech, you're the aide, you're the janitor, you're everything. And it's such a burden sometimes, but it's a beautiful exchange, because when you get to see people do better, or you help them ease their suffering, it's great. But it's the cost and the toll that it takes long term. So I just knew, I'm like, this is not sustainable for me, because I'm a really sensitive person. And during the pandemic, I saw so many people pass and share that grief. So for me, death is not the issue, but it's the grief and sharing that emotional vulnerability that weighed on me over time. And I knew, I'm like, I have a way out, and also my family. So I knew, I'm like, eventually my mom's going to be a retirement age, and like so many other Black families, many Black families, she doesn't have enough in retirement. So somebody's got to do it. And I'm like, okay, I'll do it. And so, yeah.
I salute you for stepping up to the plate. You handle it well.
Heavy is the head.
I promise you. Nice. So speaking of that, that sounds like a decent amount of things to leverage and to take on and deal with. And within that is a lot of time. So one thing I didn't ask you, are you a mother? Do you have any kids?
I don't. I have a cat child, and she's 3.
That's responsibility.
Yes, it is.
So when it comes to being your own woman, pursuing these goals, making that transition from corporate to being fully entrepreneur, how did you manage your time? Like, versus when you have to clock in, clock out, to now you freedom, because most entrepreneurs, like, I got this free time, my own boss, and they can fumble the bag. They can get stuck. They have, and then they revert back to what they already know. Yes. Same thing with me in the streets. Before I understood sales and had a new skill set, it's if the job paying slow, or when I was going through eviction, it could have been easy for me, like, I'm going to go pick up another pack. I'm going to just go, rob this person. I'm about to go break into this, all this. Like, the young kids now, they breaking into cars a lot, because they don't know skill sets. Schools are not teaching them skill sets. They teaching them things that's going to come later on in life when they're old enough to go to college or apply to job applications. Kids want it now. They want to help out their parents. So how were you moving with your time prior in your adolescent stages, like graduating high school or before you became an entrepreneur? How were you going about your time day in, day out versus now?
So when I first graduated high school, I went to college in Oklahoma at Langston University. It's an HBCU in Oklahoma, and I was on a full ride. So I knew I had to make sure I had great grades, which wasn't a problem, because academia, that was my thing. I always saw that as a way out, which is a whole other story. But I used to always prioritize my studies above dating, above sorority. I'm an AKA. And so before anything, it had to be my studies, because if I get kicked out of here because I can't pay for it, nothing else matters. So I had to prioritize that off tops. And so that's what I threw myself into. And thankfully, at a very young age, I went to Derek Thomas as an elementary schooler, and they taught us a few values, and one of them was time management. You have to manage your time properly. So thankfully, that just stuck with me throughout the years, and I was able to graduate with honors and all that good stuff. So then fast forward through to my first ventures with entrepreneurship, that became a whole different ball game, because literally when I wasn't at work, and even now, so I'm still in the process of retiring from nursing, but now I do it as it's like PRN, where you basically self-schedule. So if you don't want to show up to work, you just don't book yourself. And so I can go for months or weeks at a time, depending on what finances are looking like, and not have to work. So at any moment when I'm ready to fully retire, it's like I don't have to, put in a 2-week notice or any of that. I just can walk away from it. So it's kind of like semi-retirement. But I started to work around the clock. And so it got to be an unhealthy thing, because I'm a firm believer in you need to be fully committed and all in when you're an entrepreneur. And one rhetoric that I do challenge is that you're never off. I don't believe in that because I think that's why a lot of people reach success as far as monetary goals go and they're miserable. It's because in the midst of all of that, you've neglected everything that mattered to you in the beginning. You stop feeding your soul, you stop taking care of your body, you stop feeding your relationships, and then you wonder why like spousal, relationships are falling apart, why your children are resenting you, but you're giving them all these monetary things thinking that that's going to compensate for it, and it's not. And so, and we talked about that previously, but having that understanding, the kids have to know, like, we have to do this for a time. It's not going to be forever. But even still, with that sacrifice that they're making, you have to plan out at least a little bit of time, each week or each day, even to make sure that they still feel tended to and forgotten because tomorrow's never promised. So if you don't make it to the end of your entrepreneurship journey, God forbid, and something happens and your life is cut short, what would you want that to look like? Would you, and so that's one thing that's always in the back of my mind. It's like one day, any day, all of this can end. And so am I tending to the things that feed my soul and that matters most? Because like I said, you keep doing what you're supposed to be doing, you're going to have it. But in the midst of that, are you willing to lose everything?
So, but that you had said success and you said monetary, which brings me to the next pillar, which is money. But before we go there to money, was in school. They taught you the importance and values of time management. How do you see the world when it comes? How do you view time itself?
I view time as the second most important aspect of our lives and existence. It's time and energy for me. And years ago, I made a video about time and energy preservation because those are your most vital resources. Nobody can take that away unless you give it away. Mm-hmm. And so when it comes to time specifically, people love to say, right, we got the same 24 hours. So when I find myself complaining about, oh, I don't have time to get this done or blah, 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 I'm like, I tell myself, ma'am, you have the same 24 hours that Oprah had. What are you doing with it? What should you be doing with it? So one of the first things is doing a time audit, because if you're wasting your time, you're essentially, and it can come from many places. One big one for me was self-sabotaging. And that came from a subconscious place of like feeling unworthy or feeling like it's not possible because I haven't seen it in my family. And I had to work through that, and I still work through that to this day. But it comes down to, what do you value most? And what do you want to create? And the way you spend your time, if you were to write down for the next 24 hours or even do a look back on the past 24 hours or the past week of your life, what you have done, assess that, and that tells you what your priorities really are. And I've heard someone say that before, but it's crystal clear. If you put that on paper, and I'm a firm believer of writing everything down, because you can't deny the facts. And then it comes to either you want to commit to using your time in a more efficient and effective way, or you want to continue to use that not having time, which is not a real thing, as an excuse for why you're not achieving your goals. And just decide if you want it or not. And one thing I talked about a few episodes ago on my podcast was, if you don't want it anymore, if that fire has burnt out for you and it's not fueling you like it used to, or you're not encouraged to do it, maybe it's because you've grown since then, but you're holding on to this goal because of you told your best friend or you told your mom or your family, oh, I'm about to go and do this. But then in the midst of it, you realize, like my wellness coaching business, and that was a little blow to my ego because I was like marketing in front of the world, and then they're like, oh, what happened, but you can't be concerned about that because that's it. Life is long, God willing, and it's like, it's too long to be miserable, too short to be miserable, just because you're holding yourself to a goal or to a commitment that you made before you grew into who you are. So with time, that's it. So use your time wisely, use your energy wisely, because eventually that's going to run out.
I love it. All right. So I am going to say that. All I know is one thing you said was the last part. I was just like that with network marketing. I was out there, I'm selling travel, and all of a sudden, what happened? Why you ain't selling travel? You know what I'm saying?
What happened was...
Yeah, exactly. That's the one. So I was like, man, I'm getting tired of just jumping into all these different opportunities because now people not taking me serious.
Yes.
And then it's the imposter syndrome. Like, bro, like, I know you all your life. Like, you ain't never, and so now you're getting judged, and it's like, man, how do I do this and do that? Which, like I said, I want to bring me to our next topic, money. So I know as a day trader, you seeing numbers all day, every day. You having the type of schedule as a nurse to clock in, clock out. Money is not too much of a threshold to capture you. I feel like money is a god for most folks, and they blind to it or they're ignorant of it. Because without it, you're going to keep working for somebody else without the financial literacy. All you're gonna do is think clock in, clock out, or do a legal hustle or a side hustle, and you're always working for your money instead of letting your money work for you. So, first question I have is, when it comes to your money, how did you used to utilize it before knowing what you know about trading and just having the financial literacy that you have?
So before I knew about money, I would just spend it frivolously. Like if I want to go out to eat every day of the week, or if I want to go shopping, I'll go do that. And now what I've learned is the more money you accumulate, the more money you draw to you. And so it's just, and then financial responsibility as an adult when you grow up, even if you have a roommate or you're still living in with your parents, it's a different kind of feeling. Like Nipsey Hussle, one of my favorite things he says, which is one of my greatest, like I call him my distant mentors.
I like
He said, if you a young dude, the first thing I'm going to tell you to do, I'm not going to go philosophical. I'm going to tell you to get you some money. Because you get you some money, you're going to feel different. And that's so real because, like he said, when you're in survival mode, that's all you're thinking about is where's my next meal coming from, how my bills are getting paid. From there, you have a very limited space to be creative. You have a very limited space to be present and be at peace. And that, for me, is what it's all about. Because from there, you can do and have anything but money. If you're constantly working, I have to ask myself, like, I don't even know, this is coming up from years ago when I studied financial literacy, and it was like a real estate program in finance and stuff. And before you make a big purchase, calculate that, like, how long you're going to have to work to make up what you just spent. And then another rule I've heard is like, if you don't have 2 or 3 times what you were about to pay for something, you shouldn't be making the purchase yet. And then people, it's so many different philosophies on it, but I'm a firm believer in I do not like debt and I do not like bills. So if I can pay for something up front, I'll pay for something up front. And then I budget. But a budget, that's one thing I've learned, is you have to have a budget. Because even if, say, you don't have a handle on your spending yet, if you can assess, okay, what's eating up my money? I'm going out, I'm doing bottle service every other weekend, or I am paying my bills late, so it's late fees or things like that. You can see it and pinpoint it, diagnose it, and solve it. So that's how I deal with money now versus back then. It's like the goal is to enjoy my life, but also make sure that I am not biting off more than I can chew and committing, especially when you have like things like Klarna or Afterpay. It's like, just don't mess with that stuff because you can't afford it. And being real with yourself. And on the topic of money also, don't allow what it's looking like right now to make you try to keep up with the Joneses. Because as a nurse that barely works because I prefer to work on my entrepreneurship ventures, it's a financial sacrifice that I'm making. So it's like I don't have the car and all the fancy things that people have, but that's not my concern because I have the joy, I have the presence, I have the intention, and I have the vision. So I know as long as I continue on this path, I'm going to have all those fruits, but you don't need to make it look like what it's not just to feel. And that's a sense of like self-knowledge, knowledge of self, and being rooted in truth and not a facade and out of the matrix. Because at the end of the day, would you rather have a closet full of clothes or a car payment you can't afford versus being able to get from A to point B looking, as nice as possible within your budget, and then eventually reaching a place where that thing, like affording those things, is not an issue for you. So it's like, that's another thing. Like, don't try to be an Instagram baddie on like a $7 hour budget.
That's definitely real. That's definitely real. So that brings me to the point of when it comes to your time as money, when it comes to the aspect of what was pivoting, there's always something that, like they say, pain is the greatest motivator. What was that realization point? Like, I gotta get a hold of my money now. You said you was just spending on anything and anything. Yeah. So just give us one situation that happened. Is like, okay, this is fit to change. And then, what was your first step? Was it saving? Was it saving to budget? Was it saving for a goal? Or was it just like putting 10% to the side? Was it investing first? What was the thing that really made you pivot to spending your money different?
So honestly, it was when I was living in Atlanta and unexpected expenses came up. Like so many random things started happening. I was paying my bills there and paying my bills back home, like still helping my mom. And eventually, like I ended up getting into a crazy car accident, which was random. And then that affected my income. So from there, I had savings, but it got ate up so fast and I'm like scrambling or whatever. And I'm far away from home. I know a couple people there, but it's like you're on your own. You're grown. And that feeling of like, I'm out here and I'm grown and I'm being so transparent and so real. I had to text or call my mom for like a $20 cash app request. Like, I need an Uber to get to work. And it's like, you should never be in that position, even though life throws its curveballs. And that's one thing that I've had to learn is to be a better planner of things and not be impulsive. So when I want to make big decisions like moving state to state or relocating like inside of my city or buying a big purchase, you have to make sure that you're planning and you're padded, like you're good, and not just saying, "Oh, I want it right now. I want to go right now," because it's like, what are you running from and what are you running to?
Ooh, say that again.
So, and that's not easy to decide because it's like if you're living in a toxic household, which at the time I was in a very unhealthy home, and so I was like, okay, I have to physically leave here or things are not going to go well for me. So I just was like, okay, no. Instead of that, I could have went deeper within myself to figure out, okay, why am I allowing this to bother me so much? Because it's always going to be chaos and noise outside of you, but you have to find that still place and be like, okay, I know that eventually I'm getting out of here and then make a plan. So every day or every week you get to measure up to that plan and you see your progress. And it makes it more easy to bear those circumstances versus completely running out when you're not ready just to bounce right back, which is so embarrassing. And I've been there. So yeah.
Okay. And then as we come into a close, the last two pillars, relationships and goals. I want you to put those last two together since we're coming short on time. When it comes to relationships, were you some people are just so attached. Like that means like family, friends, dating, business relationship. They're so invested into it that they really don't know themselves. They don't have a relationship with themselves. They don't have a relationship with God. They don't have a relationship with their kids, their business. It's all over the place. So how do you look at relationships and how do you go about deciphering the discernment on who you actually want in your life?
So I look at relationships as very important connections when it comes to feeling that support and that emotional connection. I'm a firm believer that we do need each other, but you don't. There are certain people who it's better to be alone than to be around them. Because what I've learned also energetically is just like we talked about, like working jobs that you feel like you're being called away from or certain experiences, certain people. If you're constantly, and if you're a believer in the law of attraction or whatever, if you're constantly having to recalibrate because y'all keep getting into it, and I'm speaking romantically with your sister, with your mama, if it's a toxic dynamic, that is keeping you like keeping all the things that you're trying to pull into you away from you. And so it's not worth it. And so my biggest thing that I've learned recently, very recently, after dealing with like, and people throw this word around, narcissism, right? But someone with very narcissistic tendencies is you have to use your discernment, especially even when it comes to family. It's like 19 Keys mentioned one time years ago. He said there are family and there are relatives. Your family, they're the people who rock with you, they resonate, they support you. Your relatives, that's straight blood. And any day, it can flip like a switch. So don't let familial ties or blood ties make you think that you owe somebody something. I don't care if it's your father, your mother. If they're toxic and they're not making a conscious effort to reconcile with you, it's not up to you to pull all that weight. You go distance yourself, you grow, you be who you need to be, and God is going to send you who you need to support you while they grow or don't grow, right? But don't let that be a distraction because when you love somebody, that is one of the most powerful, like pain, right? One of the most powerful motivators or distractors. And so you have to have very keen discernment. And you always know, that's the thing. When it comes to discernment, you always know deep down that this is not going to work out from day one. But what we do is we choose to live out the fantasy. And then when it all falls apart, we're left picking up the pieces that we didn't have to deal with in the first place. So instead of that understanding, you don't have to be desperate. One of my affirmations recently, especially when I'm trading, is be desperate for nothing. All your needs are met. You will be provided. Thank you. You will be provided everything you need along the journey as long as you stay consciously aware of that and don't get tied or trapped into I need. It's like, no, what do you have? And what are you calling to you? Because one other thing that helps me with attraction and things like that is what you want wants you, but also what you want you already have in another dimension. So what I started doing recently is talking to my higher self when I'm trading. I'm like, homegirl, come sit with me while we at this computer and show me what to do. And she told me, she said, you know what to do. You need to act like you know. So knowing and doing two different things. You need to act like you know day in and day out. And that's not easy, but like flexing the muscle or building that resistance. Eventually, if you continue to act on the wisdom that's already within you, you will prevail. So with relationships, I know it's painful because, especially as women, I don't know if guys do this, but we create a whole fantasy. We can see 80 years down the line, us in our rocking chairs, right? With the babies and the pajamas and all that good stuff. But that's not reality. It's not reality. And it's hard, especially if you've been physically intimate, which opens up all kind of spiritual doors and energetic doors. But you have to have that discernment. And if you're someone who gets emotionally involved very quickly, I recommend delaying the sexual interaction, because from there you can have a clear head. Once you are physically intimate, and I'm speaking from experience over and over again, once you're physically intimate with somebody, you're not thinking clearly because those endorphins are flooding your brain. Especially if you're in a codependent relationship and you're up under them 24/7, you have no space for God to speak to you.
Ooh,
so you have to make sure that you come as a whole person, meaning my whole life. I'm not going to stop my workout schedule. I'm not going to stop my trading schedule or my yoga or my friend time just because I'm with this person. I have to schedule you in. And it's hard because when the person is new, you get so excited and all that, but it's like, no, like bit by bit. And eventually they can have more, but there takes time. It takes time to, first of all, know who they are and then see if they really fit, because this is the last thing, I'm going to wrap it up. If you get in a dynamic with somebody, relationship or whatever, business partnership, and you're being totally consumed to where it's pulling you away from the healthy things you used to do or pulling you into unhealthy habits, cut it right there. Pray for the strength to cut off that relationship because it's not going to end well. So that's all I have to say about relationships.
That's all I got to say. There's a lot of details on that. I like that. So the last pillar, goals. What is different from the goals you have today than you had back then?
Back then, I would say most of my goals were around academia. So I achieved those goals. And at that point, it's like, okay, now what do I want my life to look like? So now I base my goals off of what is going to provide me the most freedom, because that to me in my life is the most important thing. Not having children or not having a spouse. It's like from there, I can serve, I can create without limitation. So how can I make it to where I'm not dependent on an institution to pay me a salary and tell me where I need to be? Because if God calls me and says, I need you to go and speak here, I need you to go and do this, I need to be able to go. So I think that's what's driving me to entrepreneurship. So that's my goal. The number one goal is freedom and bliss. Follow your bliss. If you ever doubt, should I stay or should I go? Follow your bliss. And it may sound like an emotional woman speaking, but it's an energetic alignment type of thing, because eventually our emotions are navigators. So they're going to lead you to or away from where you need to be. And you have to know yourself and be comfortable enough to feel what you feel and acknowledge that and take that to God, and then have strong enough faith and courage to walk in that direction and know that eventually it's going to serve you, even if it's uncomfortable for a time. So that's it.
I love it. Okay. Now, the final thing, 4 rapid questions, real quicks. 1, time or money?
Time.
Relationship or goals?
Relationships.
What's one word that describes you?
Wow.
Ooh, I like it. And the 4th question, when it's all said and done and it's the day of your funeral, what's the one advice or tip you want to leave with people about life?
Do what makes you happy without hurting other people. That's it. No rules. I don't care if they're going to judge you. There are so many things in my past. It's like, you can judge me for it, but I know who I am. I know why I did it. As long as you know what you're doing and why you're doing it, it's okay. Just don't hurt nobody. That's it.
I love it. And there we go. TaJ, you all. This has been the Move Different podcast. I definitely appreciate your time. I'm going to have you on as a part number 2. There's more things I want to dive deep in before it became short, but please let them know you will be joining me again, right?
I will be joining you.
Awesome.
Thank you.
Well, I hope you all got a lot from this. Make sure you hit that subscribe button, hit the like, share, and can you let the viewers know how they can follow you on social media platforms?
Yes. So I'm at the World of TaJ, like THE World, TaJ, like the Taj Mahal, and that's YouTube, TikTok, and Instagram.
And you can find me at King Enlighten. That's ENLIGHTEN on all platforms. And I'll see you till next time.
Like a Zam. I ain't acting, I'm just speaking what I see behind the lens. Even though I'm speaking roles,